Because we got right here a fan of Big Apple hockey and the pride of Brick, New Jersey, Mr. Jim Dowd. Jim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Hey, just had some great appetizers from Prime 13 down here in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey. Steakhouse at the beach.
Nice.
So, hey, guys, thanks for having me on the show, man. How you doing today?
Everything's doing great.
Good.
Jim, I'll start you off with this. Let's start with the beginning of your NHL journey. 1987, you're drafted in the 8th round, and you're drafted by the New Jersey Devils, your home state. Just how were your emotions about that when you found out about it?
Actually, a pretty funny story about that. So, I'm 54 years old. Back in the day, if you weren't from Minnesota, Massachusetts, Chicago, or Michigan, they didn't even take a chance on you. And I tell people this all the time. To this day, man, you only need one person to like you. It could change your life forever. For me, that was Frank Anzalone at Lake Superior State University. And I had committed to them. That was the only school that took a chance on me. I committed to them, whatever, in, November. Back then you couldn't, do anything until your senior year of high school, not like it is nowadays either. So, I committed to them, and then the June draft is coming up, and Frank Anzalone, the coach, says, "You're probably going to get drafted." I'm like, "Yeah, really?" Didn't even cross my mind. And I never told anybody this, but I said the only team I didn't want to get drafted by, I told myself this, was the New Jersey Devils, because I thought it was going to be a charity pick, right? Back then there were 12 rounds, and I'll never forget. It's about 5:30, and I get a phone call from Marshall Johnston, who was the director of player personnel for the Devils, and Max McNabb was the GM. But Marshall Johnson called me and told me, they drafted me, in the 8th round, and I was pretty fired up, actually, because I'm a you find a silver lining in everything, pretty positive guy. I'm like, oh man, this is great. The first thing I said to myself was, oh great, at least it wasn't the 12th round, it's only the 8th, so it wasn't a charity pick. But you know what? And I proceeded to go to a party that night, had a blast, and it was amazing ever since then. Max McNabb was a great guy. He's the one that got the Devils started, and then that year, actually, that's when Lamoriello came in, 1987, 88.
Yeah.
They hired him. So, but that's a great draft story. You know what I mean? The only thing I didn't want to, because I thought it was going to be a charity pick, and then it was with 8th round, it goes my positive thinking. Oh, great. It wasn't a charity pick. It wasn't the 12th round.
As I actually just mentioned before you got on, you were drafted ahead of Theo Fleury.
Yeah, that's the only, and he's a great friend of mine. I talk to him every day almost. He's awesome, man. I love that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And and I'm pretty sure I outlasted everybody from the 1987 draft. If you look back, I lasted the longest. Didn't play the most games, but I lasted the longest. But yeah, he was after me. You know what I mean? And again,
that's
back
awesome.
then, listen, I try to tell people all the time, they ask me, what are some of the best players you played with? I said, you know what? Theo Fleury, man. That kid, he got stuff done. And if you never met him in person, if you have met him in person, you're going to be like, holy cow, how did he play? Like, I'm 6'1", and I was small back in the day. There's more younger guys than ever. There's more undersized than ever guys playing now, but there's still a ton of huge guys. Back then, man, it was just, those guys were beasts. Just some big boys. And to do what he did, unbelievable. He should be in the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned.
I agree there.
Definitely. Yeah. I agree there. He's an incredibly talented player.
He got stuff done.
Now, Jim, you mentioned Lou Lamoriello before, and we all kind of get a kick out of Lou with all the facial hair and no high jersey numbers, and we always kind of joke around and make like mafia jokes about him and being a don. But what kind of funny stories can you tell us about Lou and interactions you had with him? He seems like he's a very regimented, particular guy.
Yeah, he is, but you know what? He's one of those guys that he's easy to talk to. He just had that persona, which I think he likes a little bit, but he's an amazing human being. And listen, to do what he's done for this long, and if you look at the history of things that he's done, he started the Cape Cod Baseball League. He started Hockey East. He was one of the guys that started that. Like, he's done some incredible stuff. Wow. And to do what he's did this long in the NHL from 87, 88, and to be that successful, you're doing something right. But he's just one of those guys, man. I don't know if you ever met him. You ever shook his hand, man? He looks you right in the eye. His handshake, it's like a freaking vice grip. Like, he's as old school as you get. And I love that kind of stuff. I played better for guys that were like in my face. Hey, Dad, get your head out of your ass. Get right up in your grill, and then like, all right, I'm going to go prove this guy wrong. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I played for Rick Lee in Vancouver, and I'm not blaming anything on him, but he was a total players coach, and I didn't play well for those types of coaches. I played better for guys like, Lamoriello, who was like regimented, and you know, you had to do this. It was like sort of military style. I love that stuff. But yeah, pretty funny story, man. It was my second go around with the Devils. What was it? I was 39. He brought me back for a year. We're sitting in a meeting in Anaheim, and for some reason, I had my phone. My phone was still on. You know, I had the ringer. You know, U.S. Blues by the Grateful Dead. When my phone rang, it would play U.S. Blues. You know, and I'm sitting next to Scotty. Nice. We're in there meeting with Lou. Remember that year when we were doing very well, but he fired Claude Julien. He took over.
Yeah. Wow.
It had just happened, and we're sitting there in a meeting, man, and all of a sudden my phone goes off. I'm trying to fumble. It's playing U.S. Blues for like 30 seconds, man. I couldn't get off the phone. And he just looked at me like with that glare. You know? I just look back. I'm like, yeah, Lou, I know. But the guy's got a heart, man. You know, it's just, and again, I know everybody's all over him at different times, you know, and somehow he just gets the most out of everything that he has. You know, I had 3 Stanley Cups with the Devils. I mean, almost 5, you know. Some of the stuff he's done with the Islanders has been incredible.
Jim, speaking of motivators and being in leadership positions, you were a letter in Minnesota. How was that like, wearing a letter on an expansion team and being one of the early leaders of that Minnesota hockey club?
Yeah, it was great, especially for Jacques Lemaire. I mean, I played for Jacques for 7 years of my career, and obviously he's the one that got me into the NHL full time. You know, my 3rd year pro when he came into the Devil system, he loved me, and it's amazing. It's a pretty cool feeling. Like, you know, it's no big deal when you don't have it on. You're not really thinking of it, but when you get that A, and then all of a sudden you get upgraded to a C in an NHL team, it's pretty cool. I mean, can't go any higher than that. You know what I mean? It's the highest league and the best league in the world. Everyone wants to be there. And for a guy like Jacques Lemaire, you know, I mean, Hall of Famer, guy's got 12 Stanley Cups under his belt. He's one of the reasons the Devils were the reason why they were. When Lou brought him in, that changed the whole persona of the Devils.
Were there any little regimented things that he had you guys do, or specific things, sets of rules that he had you guys adhere to that kind of kept you guys in line and kept you guys focused? Or, you
know what, he wasn't a big rules guy. And he just was everyone's got this persona about him and this defensive coach and all that. That's a bunch of BS. You know, his training camps were great. You showed up. We did no testing. He could care less about what you did in the weight room. Literally no testing. No testing. The only testing we did was you're on the treadmill where you'd walk for 3 minutes and it would get harder and harder. And then maybe, you'd be on there for maybe 12 to 15 to maybe 17 minutes. But that wasn't because he wanted. That was to check your heart rate and all that. We did no testing. You show up to training camp. He wanted to see you play hockey. He wanted to see hockey players. He didn't give a shit about the weight room and it. He would tell us at Christmas time, guys, I don't want to see anybody else in the weight room. You could do push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups. I don't want to see anybody else lifting any more weights. You know what I mean? That's how he was. And he just wanted to see your decision-making. But he wasn't big on too many rules and all that kind of stuff. He's one of those, I give you too many rules, guys, more chances to break them. Use your common sense. And he was big on weight. The only thing he really cared about was he tracked your weight. And as the season went, when you were playing really good, he watched what your weight was. And when you were struggling a little bit, he'd go right to your weight. That's the only thing he really cared about. Wow. And you could do whatever you want with him, man. Just make the right hockey decision. Just make the right. I'm just turning my phone off here. Make the right hockey decision. That's what he was all about. I'm still convinced that he can go to the worst team in the league right now, and they'll be a playoff contender. If he went to the worst team in the league and they had some talent, they're automatically a Stanley Cup contender. Practices were simple. They were awesome. You know what I mean? I loved it. I love playing for him. I think he's the best coach.
They would certainly all defend.
That year
any team they would all defend.
I think it was 2002 that you were at the Wild. You had 13 goals and 43 points. What do you remember about that year that you saw that drastic increase in scoring? Because that's a real impressive year. I know when you were in college, you put up, I think, a 92 or 95-point season in the NCAA. But in Minnesota, 43 points certainly isn't anything to sneeze at. Do you remember who you played with, or what do you attribute to, you being essentially almost like a, top 6 forward with putting up those points?
Yeah, you know what? He was actually, my line was me, Matt Johnson, and Andrew Burnett. Think about that. Matt Johnson. You know, and Jock,
he was
don't tell Raider fans about Matt Johnson because they got bad memories of him.
I know, man. I got a great story about that though, because Matt, to this day, Matt's one of my best friends, and he went through some struggles everybody knows about. He's one of the best guys you'll ever meet, and that affected him. We'll talk about that a little later on in the show. The whole that affected him for the rest of his career. But you know, Jacques Lemaire was obviously, you see the teams we had on the Devils. Our so-called fourth line was Randy McKay, Mike Peluso, and Bobby Holik. I mean, come on, unbelievable line. But yeah, going back to what you said there, I was a scorer my whole life. You know, signed pro, got up. You know, I was a leading scorer in the minors, got one game up my first year, got sent back down. Second year, got one game up, got sent back, was still a leading scorer. They used to call me up for the power play. But then when I got up my third year, when Lemaire came in, you know, I sort of had an offensive role, but I was third line, second power play unit. And then all of a sudden, guys, you just got to figure out, do you really want to play in the NHL? And so many guys were done at 24, 25, 26 because they had, I mean, an ego. You know what I mean? I didn't care if I was on, you know, hey, I'll play on the fourth line for 10 years, 12 years, you know. But going back to that year in Minnesota, you know, I was on, you know, the power play, and, you know, we rolled the four lines, and Andrew Burnett, I mean, that guy just got points his whole career. So it was me, Andrew Burnett, and Matt Johnson, and it was a great line. You know, we could do whatever we wanted out there, and the puck was always in their end. It just clicked. You know what I mean? It was just one of those years where it clicked. Shit, that would have got me about $5 million, $6 million this year. Seriously, hey, 43 points. I probably make between $6 and $7 million a year.
You played at the wrong time.
Yeah, right? But, you know, like they say, you know what they say, good work if you can get it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marion Gaborik was on that team. You talked about Theo Fleury being one of the most talented players. How was it playing with a guy like Gaborik?
I'll never forget. So the first training camp, he was their first pick ever, the Minnesota Wild. Like, he was number 2 overall that year, right? He was their first pick. I remember walking into, when I first got there, they had the rookie camp for the week before we all went in, the vets. And I remember walking into the arena in Minneapolis, our practice facility, and watching him. He looked like Pavel Bure. I'm like, holy cow. And they're like, all right, that's Gaborik. He was 18 years old, just turned 18. I'm like, this kid looks like Pavel Bure. He was unbelievable. I think, what do you have, 18 goals as an 18-year-old on our Minnesota Wild team. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he just had a snapshot. I mean, that guy, his workout habits as an 18-year-old, his nutrition habits as an 18-year-old kid, he was just so far ahead of everybody else. And his quick snapshot and all that, he was unbelievable. His thighs were insane, you know, and he was all typical European, you know, skinny little arms. Yeah. Like rails, but shoot the puck, unbelievable. And he had the midsection and the thighs, and he was just a machine. You know, he was a heck of a player, man. He was a special player. Obviously, you guys know him from the Rangers. You know, And the only reason why the Rangers signed him, he had 5 goals that one game against the Rangers.
I remember that game. Yeah.
Oh. That's why you got him, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you know, one of those, I think that was the game. One of those goals, he got upended, and he basically did like a flip in the air. That was crazy.
A great guy, great teammate, great guy. Just, you know, awesome. You know, and that's the reason why we got Matt Johnson. Back in the day, hockey was a little different. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the reason why we brought Matt Johnson in from Atlanta.
Jim, were there any certain like players or arenas that you got really amped up to play in or play against?
Well, the Garden's always good because it's the Garden, you know, and you know, I'm from Jersey. I love Montreal Forum. Anywhere in Canada, the Montreal Forum and the old Montreal Forum, which the new one, the Bell Center's, it's a replica of it, so they did a great job with that. But the old Maple Leaf Garden and Chicago Stadium, and the old Boston Garden, all the original 6, by far they're old ones. You know what I mean? The old Boston Garden was incredible. You know, the old Chicago Stadium was incredible. Maple Leaf Garden. You know, the Montreal Forum. You know. Joe Louis Arena was probably, you know, the worst one out of the original 6, but it was still cool because it's an original 16. But Montreal was the best, man. I love that place. It's like, you know, New York Yankees, you know, Dallas Cowboys, Steelers, Celtics, Lakers. You know what I mean? Just, I don't know. You guys had to have been to the old Montreal Forum, right? Or no?
No, I haven't.
I never made it to the old Forum.
Yeah. The good news is the Bell Center. Yeah. The good news is the Bell Center is a legit replica of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the one in Toronto.
Big Apple Hockey Road Trip. Here we go.
But those ones were great. You know, I had that old school feel, you know.
Jim, I want to ask you about your first professional coach. I saw the story you tell it the other day about Herb Brooks with when he was coaching you in Utica.
Oh, Herb was, yeah.
And your first NHL goal. Go into that.
Nice. Yeah. So funny story. So the Devils tried to get me to sign pro after my junior year at Lake State, and I didn't even think for a second. I loved college. We had already won a national. I wanted to go back and graduate and try to win another one. So I went back. I ended up signing, obviously, after my senior year. And that's when they brought Herb Brooks in to coach. We had about 9 of us panned out from the 87, 88, 89 draft. So Lou Lamoriello brought Herb Brooks in to coach the Utica Devils. Get this, no assistants, nothing, just Herb. He was brought in just to teach us, basically what it's like to be a professional. I mean, Herb Brooks coming to Utica, New York, he was only going there for 1 year. Tom McVie was the head coach of the Devils. It's pretty funny how much hockey's changed. They both hated each other. McVie, and Tom McVie was old school Canadian. He didn't like college kids. You know what I mean? We were a college puke then coming out and all that. And then Herb's there. So Herb was our coach. And again, no assistants, nothing. Warren Strelo, who was the goalie coach for the 80 Olympic team, they're best friends. He would come in every now and then to work with the goalies. But Herb was awesome, man. I was like, all right, I'm getting down to the minors. I'm like, all right, I'm going to play for Herb Brooks. This is going to be great. But he really is, one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met, man. He would sit and tell stories because he's in Utica, New York by himself. He would sit and tell stories for, hours after practice and stuff. It was pretty hilarious. And he was just so far ahead of the game, man. Everything he was doing back then is how hockey is now. I mean, look at back when he coached the Rangers, when they had Rayo Ruotsalainen and all that, the stuff he was doing when they were laughing at him, that's how hockey is now. He was so far ahead of everybody and just an amazing human being. So that was my first year. I got 1 game up. My second year pro, they fired McPhee, and Herb Brooks got the head coaching job for the Devils. And I was leading scorer for him in the minors. But they were still loaded at center. So I got sent down. I got 1 game up my second year. That was against the Rangers, got sent back down. And then they didn't have that good a year. So they got rid of Herb. He went to the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, up in upper management, and they brought in Jacques Lemaire. And that year when Jacques Lemaire came in, I scored my first goal in my first game that year against the Nordiques up again in the old Colisée. Actually, that was a great rink, Colisée. And less than a week later at my house in Brick, I don't know how I got the address, a handwritten letter, a note from Herb Brooks congratulating me on my first NHL goal, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow,
that's awesome.
I'm going to dig it up and post it for you guys to see. Because
that's awesome. Yeah. Definitely want to see it.
I was like, man, it's crazy. It's like a beautiful handwritten letter from Herb Brooks. I hadn't seen the guy for a year, and he, you know what I mean? Congratulated me on my first NHL goal. But everything you see in the movie Miracle, like the legs feed the wolves, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He used to say, man, he goes, Jimmy, get those legs going. You know what I mean? That's what's going to get you and keep you in the NHL is your legs.
Those are no exaggerations then.
Yeah, no. Except for the one where he didn't curse in the movie, but he used to be like, hey, Dowd, you look like a monkey fucking a football out there. What are you doing?
Yeah, I think in the movie he said screwing a football.
Yeah.
Oh, something along those lines.
And by the way,
I got the best Herb Brooks stories ever. So Bill Hurd who's one of my great friends to this day. So again, we had 8 or 9 of us that panned out, and back then AHL was still a little bit like Slapshot. You know what I mean? You had guys that would literally.
Oh, my favorite movie.
And they didn't count. And they did not count 10-minute misconducts in the penalty or PIMS. Like these guys were getting legit 350, 400 penalty minutes a year, and they didn't count the 10-minute misconduct in those. So we had Bill Hurd, Brent Severin, Jamie Huskeroff. I mean, it was, you literally had, 7 to 8 guys that get 70 to 100 points, and you had, 5 to 7 guys that beat the shit out of anybody. That's how it was. Bill Hurd and I, the first time I ever saw the Allman Brothers. So it's in 90. My first year pro in Utica. The Allman Brothers are coming to the Utica Odd. So after practice, me and Huey, Bill Hurd, were like, all right, we're gonna grab a quick lunch and come back and hang out. You know what I mean? We're gonna get in, and we're hanging out with the roadies and all that. And next, we got some beer in the locker room. Who pops in? Herb. So we're sitting with Bill Hurd and Herb Brooks, man, and we sitting there getting ready to watch the Allman Brothers. It was freaking great. It was unreal.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it was like, they played blues. They opened up with Blue Sky for like 17 minutes. I'm like, this is awesome.
What a concert.
Yeah, Herb Brooks, me, and Bill Hurd. With a case of beer in the locker room, talking, drinking Allman Brothers.
Wow.
Not many people know that story, so hopefully this will go viral. But yeah, he was just an awesome guy, and the way he carried himself and looked was spot on. You know what I mean? He was very professional.
Awesome.
Now, Jim, I want to get into obviously your game two overrun or your game two winning goal in the Stanley Cup Finals and winning the cup. But first, I'm the only Islander fan on this panel. I know you played 3 games for the
I was there
Islanders.
for 2 weeks, man.
Yeah. What was, and that was the dark ages for the team. You're talking, Milbury and just ownership revolving door. What was your experience on Long Island for those 2 weeks and with Milbury and playing with a guy like Ziggy Palffy? I think that was his last year there before they traded him.
You know what? That was so they say your first trade's the hardest, right? Especially a college kid. So I had all the success early on with the Devils, and then I got traded from the Devils to Vancouver. And like I said earlier, I played for Rick Lee, and I'm not blaming him. I always took ownership. I just didn't play well. I didn't feel comfortable the whole time there. I finished the season out. I went back to training camp, and I just mentally, I look back on it, I just wasn't mentally ready. Nobody else's fault but my own. And then it was like a swap. Like they were putting me on waivers, and the Islanders were putting Alexander Seamack on waivers. So like the Islanders picked me up, and the Canucks picked Seamack up. So I'll never forget. I met the Islanders in San Jose for opening night, and I actually scored a goal on Chris Terreri. And remember that bullshit rule: if someone had their toe in the crease, it was no goal.
Oh yeah.
And this is how much it's so different. Like if that goal counts, maybe it's different there. But they didn't count it, and I ended up playing 3 games. I played like shit. Again, on my mind, I wasn't mentally prepared. You know what I mean? So I went through a little blip there in my career for a couple years after having all this success. Signing 2 nice contracts, winning a Stanley Cup, getting the game-winning goal. I had to go back to the minors and get my head out of my rear end. And but the Islanders, it was I mean, it just everybody knows what happened there. It was a crap show for a little bit, and it just didn't work out. You know what I mean? 3 games I think I played for. They had that 3 games in 2 weeks. Oh, you know what? And Travis Green was holding out too, so that was probably he signed right after I got there. He signed.
Oh, I remember?
So,
yeah.
But in their defense, like I said, in the Millbury's, I didn't play well. You know what I mean? And I wasn't mentally prepared. I did a lot of soul searching and resurrected my career and ended up playing 28 to 40, 12 straight years without a day in the minors after getting my head out of my rear end.
Speaking of rule changes, so you played in both the pre-cap era and the post-cap era. And obviously one of the big rule changes was, the elimination of the 2-line pass. And that kind of opened up things, speed of the game kind of increased a little bit. How was that adjusting to, the pre-cap style to the after-cap style without the 2-line pass?
You know what? I don't think it was a big deal because there was more and more college players coming in, and the Europeans didn't play with a 2-line pass either. And that wasn't a big adjustment. You know what I mean? And I think it just made teams sit back even more. You know what I mean? Because really you didn't see many more breakaways, right? Because what's the first thing you do as a coach? You're always gonna, whatever rule changes there are, you're gonna. The team that defends the best, wins the Stanley Cup is the bottom line. You know what I mean? That's never, ever going to change. Personally, I think they should put the red line back in, but it is what it is. They've done a lot of things you scratch your head at, but they've done a lot of good things. And, it's just evolving, I guess. But it wasn't a big adjustment, especially for the college or the Europeans at all, because we never used the red line.
Please like and subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of great hockey content and an entertaining, interactive podcast. So check us out and our library of videos.
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.